is the question of what kind of diseases can chiropractors cure? Do you remember when you first came into a chiropractor's office, or the first time you heard about chiropractic, you thought, well, maybe they're all right for backaches or stiff neck, and then people start telling you strange things. Somebody says, well, I took my daughter to the chiropractor and he cured her menstrual cramps. And somebody else comes along and says, I had psoriasis for 17 years and it cleared up under chiropractic care. And somebody else said, yes, well, he cured my gallstones. Somebody says he cured my diabetes, heart disease, multiple sclerosis, migraine headaches, chronic constipation, ulcers, indigestion. If you sit there long enough and listen to some of these claims, you will suspect that chiropractors are claiming they can cure everything from leprosy to ingrown toenails. And as a new patient, you must ask yourself, what kind of diseases can they really cure? I thought I'd like to answer that tonight, because the answer is very simple. No chiropractor anywhere ever cured anything. Chiropractors can't cure disease, and medical doctors can't cure disease. Anything that is ever cured is cured by the living body, not by doctors. We're in such a rush to give credit where it isn't due. When you get sick, you always want to treat the disease instead of letting your body do it. If you cut your finger, you run to the iodine bottle, you pour on iodine, you wrap it in bandage, you shoot the arm full of penicillin, the other arm gets a tetanus shot, and a week later you take off the bandage and it's all healed. You really think iodine and bandage and penicillin will heal a cut? If you think that, tomorrow morning get down to the butcher shop and buy yourself a steak and bring it home and cut it. Pour on some iodine, wrap it in bandage, shoot it full of whatever you want. The steak won't heal, will it? Of course not. And you say, well, now you're being ridiculous. Of course the steak won't heal because it's not alive. But that's the point. Let's stop giving credit where it isn't due. Life heals, not doctors. All the scientists in the world put together couldn't heal a blade of grass. And yet your living body, as you sit here right now, is making living flesh and blood out of the food you had for lunch today. What I want to do tonight is totally destroy your faith in doctors of all kinds, because not one of them can cure anything. And I want to give you some faith through understanding. I want to give you some confidence through common sense, through knowledge of this great, fantastic body of yours. You are the doctor. Built into you is all of the wisdom of nature, and that wisdom that the chiropractor calls the innate intelligence of life knows all there is to know about healing. No doctor can cure anything. You and you alone can heal. In fact, if your body were working right, you wouldn't have got sick in the first place. Let's discuss just how great this body of yours is. I'll give you one example, and if that one example doesn't convince you, then I'm going to quit. Let's think for a moment about the start of a new human being, the union of two little cells. Now, there's a little female egg cell about the size of a dot made by a fine-pointed pencil, so minute you can barely see it with the naked eye. That meets up with a male sperm cell that's even tinier. Well, maybe a little smarter, but smaller. Sorry, girls. Two little cells get together, and from this, a whole human being is going to be formed. As the one cell now, as it's united, one cell gets a little bigger and divides into two. Divides into 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, just keeps multiplying. And then when it looks like a little mulberry, somehow it knows to change. Remember, they all started out from one cell. They should all be the same, shouldn't they? And yet now, certain of the cells begin to change, and this little mulberry-looking mass gets a dent along one side that the scientist calls the primitive streak. That primitive streak is going to become the first organ of the human body. You know what the first organ is? Always fascinates me as a chiropractor to know that the first organ to develop is always the brain and the spinal cord. Now, I wondered why. So I turned to the medical physiology textbooks, and Halliburton's textbook in medical physiology states, the brain and the spinal cord are the first to form because they're the master control system of the body that will regulate and control the function of every other system from then on. But then, as though around an invisible skeleton, with no doctors around to tell it what to do, no scientists, no PhDs, no surgeons, no pediatricians, this little speck of light knows how to form a perfect human being. And in 280 days, nature has done her job and a perfect being is born. Now, do you assume for one moment that the wisdom that designed this perfection quits when the baby is born? The baby is born may be weighing 6.5 pounds and is 20 inches long. It is going to grow up to be 6 feet tall and weigh 180 pounds. And everything will grow proportionally. You think it's luck that there are 2 holes in the skin just where the eyes come? Or is there some planning here? How do the fingers know how long to grow? They don't just keep growing. Somehow they know there's an inner wisdom that tells them when to quit. The heart cells grow to exactly the right shape and size to form a heart. And the liver cells always stay in the liver. They never go into the eye. So apparently the wisdom that created this body, that which the chiropractor calls the innate intelligence, the inborn wisdom of life, it's still there even after you're born. And it regulates your growth all the way until you're fully grown. But now when you're fully grown, can we now assume that nature quit? Now it's time for doctors? The wisdom that created your body is still there. In fact, if you understand this next part, you'll understand everything there is to know about health and healing. I said earlier that in order for your body to be healthy, the 25 to 30 quadrillion cells must be doing their job. That there are highly specialized cells, and if they're not doing their job, then the job won't get done. I also said that this body, when it's working right, can last 120 to 150 years. That apparently is nature's scheme of things for human beings. But the individual cells, they don't last 120 years. You know how long your cells last? If I brush my hand, I brush off millions of dead cells, and new ones grow from inside to replace them. Your body is constantly replacing its cells at the rate of about 3 billion every 60 seconds. As you sit here right now, your heart cells are dying. But don't worry about it, because as one dies, nature makes a new one to replace it out of what you had for lunch today or breakfast this morning. It's estimated that heart cells live about 90 days, and then they die. Red blood cells last about 120 days, and then they die, and they're replaced. And by the time 14 months has gone by, all of the vital organs have been replaced. And it takes about 7 years to replace the entire body, bones and all. Every 7 years, you have a brand new body. Now that means if you've been married 21 years, you're on your 3rd wife already. Yeah? The last time I said that in a lecture, somebody said, yeah, if she's my 3rd wife, how come she's so much like the other 2? But there is a reason for that. While the whole body is replacing itself, as far as science knows, there's one part of the body that does not get replaced. The brain and the spinal cord. Apparently, they have to last you all of your life. Now, this is interesting. The brain and the spinal cord are the first system to be developed. According to Halliburton's textbook of medical physiology, they are the master control system which regulate everything in the entire body. Now we find out they have to last you the rest of your life. Every other part of your body is replaceable, except the brain and the spinal cord. Do you think it might be a good idea to take care of your brain and spinal cord? That's all chiropractic wants you to do. We say, since every part of your body can be replaced except the brain and spinal cord, and since the brain and spinal cord, if they are working properly, will regulate the proper growth of everything else, you don't have to worry about sick organs. Medicine has failed for thousands of years because it's trying to cure sick cells. Chiropractic says if you have sick cells in your body, let them die. Pretty soon they're going to be replaced by new cells. Now, if the new cells come in strong and healthy, as the old ones die out, then disease passes from the picture. But if the new cells that are born just as sick as the old ones, then the disease goes on, and you'll never get well. And this is where chiropractic comes into the picture. We don't want to cure your sick cells. We just want to make sure that all the new cells that are born are given a fighting chance to be born healthy. Let's take a very quick look at the anatomy of this brain of ours. Because it's the most vital organ in the body, it's given special protection. Nature surrounds it by solid bone. The skull, the cranial vault. But you'll notice the brain is not totally enclosed. Did you know you have a hole in your head? Well, you really do. I can see some of you don't believe it. Let me show you. On our little demonstrator here, up on top of the spine is the skull, the base of the skull. And as I tilt it forward, you can see there's a large hole right here in the bottom. And you, too, have a large hole in the bottom of your head. Of course, it's not very scientific to say you have a hole in your head. So in science, we give that a name in Latin. It's called the foramen magnum, which means large hole. Now, through that hole, the brain extends all the way down the length of the body. But because it's just as important down here as it is up top, it too is surrounded by bone. Inside the bone of the spine runs this extension of the brain called the spinal cord. Millions upon millions of nerve fibers. But if the spine were just one piece, you wouldn't be able to bend or twist or turn. So old Mother Nature, in her wisdom, has taken this bone and cut it up in pieces. 24 movable segments called vertebrae. And now that spine is flexible. Let's take another look at the bones of the spine. From the pelvis or the hip bones at the bottom, the sacrum, the little triangular portion that forms the base of the spine with a little coccyx or tailbone underneath. And on top of that, the 24 movable vertebrae or parts of the spine. And inside, where this flexible conduit is shown, in your body, the spinal cord connects the brain with all parts of the body by running inside the bones of the spine, and in between each pair of bones, there's an opening through which nerve branches pass out. Millions upon millions of nerve fibers from the brain branch out into the other parts of the body. And when they get out here, they divide and redivide and subdivide and make a network of nerves all over the body. Each one of those nerve fibers is about 100 times thinner than a human hair. And over those nerves passes the nerve energy, the electrical energy that keeps your body going. Every single part of your body, in order to work, needs a good nerve supply from the spine. As the kidney. Over the kidney is the adrenal glands, the liver. They only work properly if they have a nerve supply from the spine. So does the gallbladder, the spleen, the pancreas, the reproductive organs, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the toes, the fingers, either directly or indirectly. Your body is an entire network of little chemical factories. And in order for you to be healthy, all of those little chemical factories must be working properly. And they all interrelate to each other. Now, what does all of that have to do with chiropractic? Just this. Every organ gets its nerve supply through the spine. And that's fine as long as the spine is in its proper position. We take so much for granted, sometimes we forget the beauty of nature's structure. Have you ever thought how your fingers just happen to fit your hand? They wouldn't fit the person next to you because they're custom made for you. Your eyes are exactly the right shape and size for your eye socket. Otherwise, every time you look down, you lose something. Everything fits. And exactly the same is true of the bones of the spine. They're so perfectly shaped that when the bones are in their proper position, the openings are exactly the right shape and size for the nerves which come through to the organs. But if something should happen to your spine, if one of those bones should become misaligned, twisted out of place, even minutely, that's what a chiropractor calls a subluxation. Let's see the damage that can do. This is a sketch reproduced from a photograph to be found in the textbook of neurosurgery. And it shows 4 of the bones of the spine. You'll notice these 2 are lined up neatly, one in front of the other. The disc in between them is of good shape and size. Nice and even all the way through. The bones are even. The normal nerve trunk is big and fat and juicy. But up here, one of these bones has slipped. That's called a subluxation. Now, when that happens, the disc becomes squeezed and pinched off and irritated, begins to degenerate and disintegrate. This is often called a slip disc, sometimes called a herniated disc. Usually both terms are wrong. In actual fact, what's happened most of the time is that the bone has slipped out of place. See how it's not lined up with the one above and the one below? That's called a subluxation. And the worst thing that it does is not to the disc, but to the nerve trunk. Because the opening is now made smaller, this nerve trunk is inflamed and irritated and damaged. Whatever organ is at the end of this poor thick nerve is not going to work right. Let me explain it this way. Did you ever wonder what is the difference between a living, breathing, walking, talking, healthy human being and a corpse? Chemically, they're the same. But if I cut my finger, it heals, and if I cut a corpse, it doesn't. I put food into my living body, and the body converts that living food into eye tissue that can see. I put the same food in the corpse, and it rots. Why? Well, apparently my body has this mysterious something called life. And one of its manifestations is life energy. It's a sort of electrical energy that is generated in the brain. In one of our large medical colleges recently, an experiment was done in which they tapped the brain energy of a living rabbit. They put electrodes into the rabbit's head, and the electricity that they gathered from that, they used to run a radio. A radio that worked as long as it had that particular form of electricity. But because it was drawing the life energy from the rabbit died. And then the radio stopped. So they plugged in another rabbit, and it worked again. And what they were proving was that the energy from the brain that makes you alive is very similar to electricity. And every organ in your body is rather like an electric appliance. It doesn't work unless it has power. When Governor Wallace of Alabama was shot recently, damage was done to his spinal cord, preventing the flow of energy from the brain over some of those nerves, and from the point that he was shot, from there on down, he was paralyzed. He will heal again. He'll be normal again if his nerves heal. If the nerves don't heal, he'll never heal. In other words, the nerves are the only carriers of that kind of life energy. And in order for your organs to get a good nerve supply, it has to come from the brain over the nerves. When there is a subluxation, as we showed you before, that life energy is choked off, and the poor organ at the other end gets a damaged or partial nerve supply. Now here we have a light bulb that has no electricity at all. And of course, having no electricity, it doesn't work. There's nothing wrong with the light bulb. I could give it aspirin and it wouldn't work. I could give it an injection. I could give it surgery. I could cover it in goose grease and it still wouldn't work. The thing that it needs is electricity. When it has power, it works. There was nothing wrong with it to start with. Every organ in your body is like that light bulb. It needs electricity. And the only place it gets it is from the brain, over the nerve. If we were to cut down its electrical supply, the organ wouldn't work. If you cut the nerve supply to any organ, it doesn't work. Fortunately, nature protects us by giving most organs multiple nerve supply. So you can cut one nerve and the organ still gets a nerve supply from elsewhere. But one other thing could happen in the body, as could happen to this light bulb. Instead of turning the electricity either on or off, I could perhaps fix up a rheostat to cut down on the electricity going to the light bulb. Then it would still work, but not quite as well. With only half power, it only works at half efficiency. And that's exactly what happens in your body when you suffer a subluxation. It cuts down the flow of energy passing from the brain over those nerves. Everything in this body is made to measure, and only when these bones are perfectly lined up is the opening exactly the right shape and size to fully conduct the nerve and all of the energy over there. If one of those bones slips, causing a subluxation. It chokes off the flow of life energy to some organ. And all the pills, powders, and potions in the world will never make an organ work properly again as long as its life energy is choked off. If you have cells in your body right now working at that kind of power, you'll never be healthy again. Those cells will never be healthy again. Medicine has spent thousands of years trying to cure those sick cells. Chiropractic says, let the sick cells die. They're only going to last a few weeks or a few months anyway. Let them die. When they do, they're going to be replaced by new cells. Now, if the new cells come in also with half power, then you're going to stay sick. The way to end that problem would be to get the pressure taken off of the nerve, get the power turned back on again, and you could have all of the organs gradually replacing themselves, and you would heal. As healthy, strong cells replace old, sick ones, you come back to life and health, and you give the credit to whatever doctor you happen to be going to. You could say, it was the pills that I took. It was the vitamins that I swallowed. It was the special diet that I went on. It was the chiropractic adjustment. But it was none of those things. Only one thing heals, the power of life itself within your body. And if that power is choked off, then you will never heal. Unfortunately, when that power does get choked off, most of us don't know about it. It probably happens when we're quite young. Perhaps it was a fall off a tricycle when you're 3 years old. If you fell off a tricycle at age 3, cutting down the nerve supply to your heart, you're not going to have a heart attack at age 3. The heart can bear up with this kind of energy, maybe 90% of its energy. And you grow up thinking, my heart's fine. You go for an examination, and the doctor tells you, your heart's fine. You go for an insurance checkup, and everybody says your heart's fine. But after 20 or 30 years of bearing up under great strain, then the heart can't handle it. And one day, somebody's out pushing his car, perfectly healthy, and he suddenly drops dead of a heart. And everybody says, gee, it's funny. He never did that before. He was perfectly healthy, never had a sick day in his life, and then suddenly dropped dead of a heart. In actual fact, he had lots of sick days, but they weren't sick enough for him to see. He was just going through life with the power partially turned off. And sometimes, when you have little accidents, you stop in your car at a stop sign, perhaps somebody hits your car from behind, and you feel fine afterwards. The power is cut down so little that you can't feel the difference. You couldn't even see the difference on the light bulb. And we cut it down again, and you don't feel any difference. And as I sit here talking to you, gradually the power could be cut down so slowly, step by step, that at no time would you notice the power is going down. There's no specific incident where one day you feel well, and another day you feel sick. And day by day, people meet you on the street, and they say, how are you? And you say, I'm fine. Compared with what? Well, compared with how I was yesterday. And you compare yourself with how you were 10 years ago, and you say, well, I'm getting old. Your body's supposed to last you 120 to 150 years. You've got the nerve to sit there at age 55 and say, I'm getting old? You're not even halfway home yet. You see, we had a patient who went to a doctor because his knee hurt him. And he said, doctor, my knee's hurting. It's all swelled up. And the man was 74 years of age. The doctor examined him. He said, well, you've got to expect that kind of thing at your age. He said, yes, but doc, the other leg's just as old. How come it doesn't hurt? And we go through life blaming sickness and disease on old age, when in actual fact what's happened is the power has been cut down gradually and slowly over the years. So slowly, so quietly, we haven't known anything's wrong. And then you go into a chiropractor for the first time. And what does he do? He doesn't cure your disease. He doesn't even treat your disease. He doesn't even need to know what your disease is. Chiropractor does one thing. He examines that spine with his hands, with his instruments, with his x-rays, and he finds those minute areas where one bone is misaligned, pinching off nerves, or several bones are misaligned, pinching off nerves. Gradually, step by step, he eases the bones gently back into place. He can't move in 1 minute what's been slipping out of place gradually for 30 years. It may take time to gradually rehabilitate the spine. It's like an orthodontist trying to move teeth. It has to be done gradually, gently, over a period of time to rehabilitate and allow all of those nerves to come back to life. And then you, who've been going through life with the power choked off, not even knowing it, now suddenly get a burst of energy that you didn't know you had. And I love to hear chiropractic patients talk, people who were never sick. And they go to a chiropractor, and after a while they say, you know, I feel much better, Doc. Much better than what? You weren't sick. Yeah, I know, but I feel better now. The only side effect of chiropractic is improved health. When the power gets turned on, there are no negatives, there is no damage. Remember this, every pill, every medication, every drug you take, even those that may be necessary to save life, are damaging the body while they're doing it. There's no such thing as a drug or a medication that does not do harm. That's why last year the Food and Drug Administration was forced to take off the market 1,400 commonly used drugs and medications that have been around for 15 and 20 years, and you and your parents were given those drugs and told they make you healthy. Now we find they not only don't make you healthy, they actually made you sick. So they've taken them off the market and replace them with 1,400 new ones, which they'll take off the market 10 years from now for the same reason. Every drug, every medication, every treatment of disease damages the body. The only thing that does not damage the body is natural health. Turning the power back on makes you stronger, healthier in every respect. Now, there's only one thing left to be discussed. When should you see a chiropractor? Is it for backaches? Is it for headaches? Is it for cancer? And the answer is it's not for any of those. Every human being needs a good nerve supply all of his life. I wish you had a big red light in the middle of your forehead, and every time you suffered one of these subluxations, that thing would light up and say tilt. But since it doesn't, you have no way of knowing when a bone goes out of place. That power, when it's cut down, is cut down so gently and so gradually, you can't even notice. The only way to find out, I'm a chiropractor and I don't know at this moment if my power is being choked off. And the only way to find out is for me to go to another chiropractor and have my spine examined regularly. Not when you're sick. One of the most stupid things we've ever done in the United States is to involve ourselves in crisis therapy. We ignore our health all of our lives until it's too late, and then we go to some doctor and look for a miracle. And if he won't give us one, we blame him and we go to somebody else. By the time you get to a doctor of any kind, it may already be too late. What about all these friends you talk to about chiropractic? And they say, if I ever get sick, I'll go and see your doctor. And 20 or 30 years go by, and they're never sick enough. And then suddenly they wake up one morning, and they have terminal cancer. And I say, what can your chiropractic do for that? Well, it could have prevented it. That's for one thing. Every sudden illness was preceded by years of the power being cut off. And if at any time along the way that power had been turned back on, it would have given a better chance at health and life. It is a sin and a crime to restrict chiropractic to sick people. Everybody needs his spine examined regularly. You have to be out of your mind to want to walk around for 20 years with a power cut off. And then I've seen this. You come to a chiropractor and you say, I've been coming for 6 months now. How come I don't feel any better after walking around this way for 40 years? You know what I say? Why don't you get in the car and go home and bring in your children or your grandchildren? So 30 or 40 years from now, they're not in the same rotten mess that you're in looking for a miracle. There are no miracles. Protect your health while you have it. Don't be silly enough to let it get lost and then look for a miracle to get it back. The United States of America is one of the sickest nations on earth. Certainly the sickest of all the industrialized nations. Partly because of the pollution in the air we breathe, the pollution in the water we drink, the pollution in the food we eat or the chemicals we eat instead of food, and don't forget the worst pollution of all, the pollution of the human bloodstream by drugs and medications. There can be no health unless it be natural. Health is your God-given birth. It's yours to protect, to keep. Once it's lost, it may be too late to get it back.